Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got a pretty interesting combination out here to try, and it's one that might work out for us, it might not, but I definitely want to test it to see what happens based on some other shells that we've tested that are similar to this, and to see what kind of performance we can get compared to what we've already seen. So if you've been around the channel for the last month or so, then you know that we've done a bunch of testing with some Longbeard XR 20 gauge shells with some very disappointing results and patterns that are just kind of all over the place. So I went and picked up some of these. These are some of your standard old Winchester Super X 20 gauge shells. They're a 2 3/4 inch, 1 ounce payload of lead 6s moving about 1165 feet per second. Because I kind of wanted to see, well, since the Longbeard shells in 20 gauge kind of seem to be all over the map, what kind of pattern can we get out of the Super X shells? Now it is a little bit lighter of a payload, being 1 ounce instead of 1 1/4, and it is only a 2 3/4 shell instead of a 3-inch shell. But if these give us the same performance or better than the Longbeard shells at I think $11 a box or something, they are tremendously cheaper at the same time. So we'll see what happens and if you can use these for a turkey shell or not. And as for the setup we've got here today to run them through, I brought out the Stevens 301 20 gauge, and for a choke I decided to start here. This is the Cabela's Blackmaxx 575 constriction turkey choke. Definitely nothing fancy. It's in that lower mid-tier price range. I think this choke was 30 or 35 bucks, but this Blackmaxx 575 has given us some of the best patterns we've gotten out of this 301. So I figured we'll start here and see what we can get and go from there based on what kind of results we actually see. But as for the test today, everything is set up the same as usual. I'm not going to handicap this at all, so it's going to be a 40-yard shot just like always. I do have the chronograph as well so we can get our velocity out of the shells. So we'll get you guys a view of this target and take the shot and then check out what kind of results we got. So let's head over here and see what kind of pattern we're able to get out of the Super X 6s. I don't expect the typical Longbeard really tight nice pattern, but then again the 20 gauge Longbeards have not been great, so can these do any better? I don't know. Let's go over here and take a shot and see what we get. Okay, so that shell gave us 1164 through the chrono. The box claim was 1165, so that's 1 foot per second below their claim. So I'd say that they're pretty well right on the money with their velocity here. And this 1164 is plenty good enough with a lead 6 out to that 40-yard range, especially considering we typically see right at the 1100 to 1110 feet per second mark out of the Longbeard 6s. This is perfectly fine. But what kind of a pattern did they actually give us down there at the paper? Let's go down to that 40-yard target and see what we got. All right, now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. We might be just a touch off to the left on our overall pattern here, but we do still clearly have a dead turkey. There are a couple through the brain there, as well as 1 or 2 more down the spine. So yeah, even at 40 yards, you would have absolutely gotten that bird. Now, as for the pattern as a whole here, I think it's kind of realistic for what we expected to see. It's definitely not what you would call a traditional Longbeard XR style pattern, but we didn't expect that. These are not necessarily made to be a turkey shell, but I will say that this pattern isn't really too much different from what we've seen from the regular Longbeard 20 gauge shells either. So that just tells you right there how all over the map they are as far as consistency goes. That even a cheap Super X shell can give you very similar results to what a Longbeard shell can. So something is definitely up with 20 gauge and turkey shells from Winchester. But as for this pattern here, definitely much more broad, much more open. We don't really have a super tight central core area. It's just kind of a broad swath of shot across the middle there. Is it anything great for a turkey pattern? No. Is it the ultimate pattern that I'm looking for in a turkey shell? Definitely not that either. If this is the only shell you could find and needed to hunt turkeys with a 20 gauge, I think you would probably still be okay out to the 40-yard range. I am not going to be the guy to push it much past that, but definitely inside of 40, you'll still be plenty good enough. Now, can we tune this in a little bit with a little bit tighter of a choke or even a little bit more open of a choke or something? Possibly so. I'd be curious what this would do if you really choked it down to something like the Carlson's 555 that we've got. It might ruin the pattern. It might tighten it up. I don't know. We definitely should do some more testing with this and see. But as for this pattern as a whole, I mean, it's about what we expected, like I already said. So I guess to wrap it up here, it's not great as far as a turkey pattern, but I definitely want to do more testing with it and see what happens, because I do think we can get this a little bit better. Okay, and here's the wad out of that shell, and it is just your very typical Target style wad. Definitely nothing too fancy about it. It does have a pretty sizable little gas cushion piece right here. But, I mean, there's no rips or tears or pinholes or anything in the wad. There's nothing stuck down in there. It opened up pretty evenly. So I definitely think it did what it was supposed to do as well as it could for today's test. It's just not a turkey wad, so I think the results we saw are pretty realistic again for it. But either way, definitely nothing too fancy or special to see here as for the wad. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about that result right there? It is good enough out to that 40 yards to get you a turkey with, clearly. Now, I wouldn't push it much past that, and it's definitely nothing that I would call a great turkey pattern. Compared to a more typically loaded turkey shell, this definitely doesn't really compare to that. But on the flip side, as for lead, longbeard, 20 gauge turkey shells, that's not really too far off from what we've seen out of those. We've had one good shell out of, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 of them that we've tested now with the longbeard 5s and 6s and 20 gauge. The rest of them have pretty well all looked exactly like that. So are the Super X shells realistically any worse than the longbeard 20 gauge shells are? I don't know. I think we should do some more testing, run these through a few different chokes and see, can we tune it in a little bit better, and how consistent are they compared to the other stuff, and kind of go from there and see what results we get. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? It's definitely not an ideal pattern or a fantastic looking pattern, but would you use that if that's what you had? And maybe what other chokes might you want to see these shot through to see maybe we can tune them in a little bit tighter than that? Let me know all your thoughts down below. But as for today's test, I think it's a pretty realistic result, at least to start with here. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys today, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.